So we're going to talk about the pickup game.
Let's do that. Yeah. So
yeah. So you're the executive producer. You and your company. So
I own half of the film, actually. Not only am I the executive producer, I'm a half owner in it. Yeah.
Okay. And so explain to people what that means to as far as you're concerned.
Well, I came on. I just going back a fraction. I met the boys in Cannes in 2017, and they were looking to, get their film finished. They needed a bit of finance. I jumped in and said, look, I'll be a half equity holder, a half shareholder, and executive producer. And I just liked the story. I just thought, shit, man, here's a story. I've got two daughters. And effectively, yeah, right. Okay, yeah. And there's this subculture in the world where they teach men how to use a whole series of, I think, some of those techniques are okay, but most of them are very underhanded and very targeted and particularly unpleasant for women. And I thought that story needed to be told. And not only that this was an opportunity really to show, that these people exist out there, no one knows about it. It's a very underground, I don't know how it's kept so secret for so long.
I never heard of it.
Yeah. So I was just blown away. Like when I met him and he told me about it, and they've got their own language too, a pickup artist, they've got their own whole, PUA, pickup artist,
Yep.
So, and I met a PUA over there, pickup artist. PUA was there. I got introduced to him, and I was like, okay, so, and that's what they do for a living. They teach other men how to pick up women. But, when you watch the movie, you sort of get a sense of how they do it, and you think, geez, this isn't right. I mean, that some of their techniques are so, sad, it's just next level, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, they have like guys walking up to, it's like absolute strangers on the street, women walking and just almost stalking them and peppering them with questions and things. It was kind of bizarre.
Yeah, and and then at the end, I mean, some of those guys go to jail, and rightly so. But I mean, they're at the point too where they would write what's called, so they go out and they meet a woman or something, and they write what's called a lay report, where they talk about, hey, I met this woman, I said this, I got her into bed, and this is what happened, and I'm like, wow. But one of them wrote a lay report about what actually happened that got them in jail. So It's pretty serious. I mean, it's not like they're not like, a chivalrous type of, guy. They're very interesting people, yeah.
Yeah, because it's interesting when you start watching the film, you're thinking, okay, this is kind of almost lighthearted, and it feels like, oh, well, I'll take some notes and maybe I can pick up some pointers. But then it doesn't take long before you're going, this feels kind of creepy. This is not good. And by the end, you're just like, I got to wash. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and particularly, I mean, the people that the pickup artists do particularly well on are guys most unlikely to pull a woman. Like if you're, a guy with, a bit of nous and you're doing all right, then, you probably don't need a pickup artist. You'll know women and you have relationships with women. But if you've got no relationship with women ever, and so you now reach out to a pickup artist that's, like these guys, they're idolized. They're like a new god, and there's no church for people. There's no spirituality in the world. There's so much missing now in the male world. Males used to have a lot of groupings together, and we used to come together and do a lot of stuff, and that's missing now. So suddenly these guys with no male role models suddenly think that these pickup artists are the ones, and they show pictures of these very nice lifestyles. Hey, drive a Ferrari, have a hot woman, come and do the party scene and drink champagne with us. And these guys are very vulnerable and they're very lonely, and they'll pay $10,000 upward to go off to Ibiza or Monte Carlo or somewhere like this and spend a week with a pickup artist learning all the different techniques and stuff like this. And it was just like, I just can't believe this is going on in the world,
So maybe you can, I don't know how much you know about how the film was actually made, but it seems like there's a lot of, secret footage and all that stuff. And can you enlighten us as to how, because it's the O'Connor brothers were the directors, right?
Yeah. So what happened originally was that they started filming that way back in about 2005, before the Me Too campaign began.
Right.
So these very misogynistic and bragging males were out there touting their wares, come in, and hey, And you see the opening scene is like, if I can't get this woman into bed, I'm going to burn her to the ground.
Right.
Literally, they just, it's not just like a subtle, hey, if I don't, get her to bed, then, I won't see her next week. It's like, no, I'm going to fucking burn her to the ground. And so there's this very misogynistic male, overtone with it. And then about 2 years into it, then the Me Too campaign came up and, the Weinstein thing. And suddenly these PRA going, actually, that we don't want this, what you've recorded, we actually don't want that, played to anyone, because we suddenly think it's not right, because we've got all these women after us. And effectively they were just like, well, we've got footage, and we've filmed it, and you wanted to be in it, and so we're not going to just now recant, a signed agreement. We're playing it. This is going ahead. If you didn't like it 6 months ago, we haven't traveled around the world paying a fortune to film you for you to just now change your mind and stuff. So we said we're going ahead anyway, and they were very happy about that, as you can well imagine. But the Okada boys, they I don't know how they actually ended up first of all finding out about it. They've done a lot of documentaries in the past. This is definitely their best, but they just picked up on the story and just ran with it and just went, holy smoke, these guys exist in the world. Let's get it. And I think what I love, one of the guys that invented, that did the big book, the pickup book and stuff like that, he's like, the leading pickup artist of his age, and he's now living with his 3 cats, and I think the finish is great, like, here's this guy, I can have any woman I want, and there he is, hey Priscilla, and then Priscilla's this big fat cat comes in and he goes, this is my new it's just like, it's a real sad end, the whole thing sort of, you go, oh well, it's so exciting, we've got these cool guys, and they got girls, and they've got cars and travel lifestyle and stuff like this, and then suddenly you see, Jesus, this is, and there's this guy with Priscilla's cat, just in this little wee flat somewhere in LA, saying, I wish I'd never been involved in the industry. It's a real big turn. It did really well overseas, because we were in the New York Doc Festival and went to Toronto for the Hot Doc. So it's done all the big rounds, and it's been sold into a lot of territories and stuff like that. So it's done really well, but we're about to launch onto Apple and all the streaming services, so all the TVOD services. So it's quite an exciting time. We're very close to getting that launch. So,
oh, cool.
I Wonder have come in and they're playing it, and then we've got obviously we're going to do it on Apple and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's going to go great guns, because people have no idea this industry exists. It's a multi-million-dollar industry, and no one's ever seen. I don't know where you see in this day and age a guy saying, if I can't have this woman, I'm going to burn her to the ground, and some of the stuff that they do is just like, wow, next level, like I'm here, here I am, I'm meeting this woman, she's doesn't know me for about, and I'm videoing her, I've got a video camera on her, so
That's crazy. So are there any legalities pending, or are these guys chasing you around and trying to get this thing taken down?
No, we've got it all covered, because we've got insurance. Yeah, so we're completely insured from all the different aspects of everything. So it's all insured now. Yeah. So there's no pending anything really. Yeah.
And so what's happening to these guys once they've kind of been exposed by this film?
Well, we haven't done a national release yet, so so as far as I know, nothing. And the ones that have done illegal stuff have been put in jail. But I do question. It's not really so much really a question of legality. I think it's just a moral question, really. Like, it's like, is this acceptable behaviour for people to be doing this? So there's no real, there is no real legal aspect that's, obviously we saw in the film some people go to jail.
Right.
But the professional guys are, probably a step, aren't at that level. But I would just we all question the morality of these people. What is going on here?
And you and I are guys. What is the female reaction to it, Ben? Do you have any idea?
Oh yeah. Well, we've seen it right through New York. They're just horrible. They just can't believe it. They're just shocked. They're just like, Jesus, this exists in the world. They didn't know. And some of them says, I've had this experience, they've been like, wow, this has happened to me. I've been in this situation, where these guys come in. And because you don't realize that these guys are professional artists, they're trained to say certain things at a certain time in a specific sequence to get women into bed, and to, tick another box in their little wee thing, so yeah, away they go. Yeah.
And there was a novel, or not a novel, but a book called The Game that came out about 15 years ago, right?
Yep, yep,
And Neil Strauss, I think it was
yep,
the author.
yep,
So
yeah, yeah.
how does that relate to the film?
Well, Neil Strauss got involved. Several pickup artists went and set themselves up in LA, and they set up a house there, and they started honing their craft. And Neil Strauss at that time was a journalist. He'd done journalism for Rolling Stone, and he was sort of involved as a PUA, but he was also recording it. So he filmed. It was being filmed, and he was writing about it. So he wrote sort of the book about it. And it was a real big bestseller, and people started. It was sort of almost like a textbook for a lot of people to use as how to pull women. So apparently, through all the universities. I mean, I wasn't in United States University ever, but through the universities, this book became like a universal. Hey, this is how you can pick up women and what you say and what you do. So he got really big. He is not on camera. He doesn't want to have anything to do with it. We've asked him to come on, but he has chosen not to come on. But yeah, it was just really amazing, really, what had sort of happened, in that the whole world of it as it sort of grew. It just grew and grew and grew, and then he actually wrote a book about it, which was a huge book. It did really incredibly well.
So you mentioned the Me Too movement, and obviously a lot of movements are happening right now all over the world, especially in the States. So do you think that this is going to be an effective conversation starter with everything that's going on?
Oh, I think so, absolutely. Yeah, I think it'll be a huge conversation starter, and I think a lot of people will become aware. So I think the other thing is just having this it's a bit of a cautionary tale. It's also a bit of an awareness tale too. There's these men and people that exist in this world that are trained in the field of sort of romance and love, as you understand it, and just doing it in a very sort of odd, underhanded way. And I think it's going to get. I think it'll be really good for a conversation starter and people to actually look deeply at it. And certainly we started a lot of conversations in Canada. We went to Canada for the Hot Docs Festival, documentary festival, which is the largest documentary festival in the world. And we had something like 600 published articles.
Oh man,
it just went crazy. Everywhere was publishing this story. We sent. We had a PR. It was just hundreds and hundreds of stories just went wild.
Crazy. Because with a title like The Pickup Game, you think it's a film that's going to appeal to men, but obviously, perhaps women should watch it and take some notes.
Well, women. It's very popular with women because they're like, Jesus Christ, they just want to know what men say and do and how they get the way that they manipulate them. They'll do backhanded compliments. So those are the second best pair of shoes I've seen tonight, and the woman's like, well,
what the heck?
Who's got the best? Why am I not there? It's all this, and it's all just these psychological little tricks. None of it's genuine. There's no genuineness about the whole thing.
Yeah, well, that was the feeling I got at the end of the film. Was just this emptiness of the whole. There was no emotion, no feeling for anybody. It was pretty scary.
One of the pickup artists says, "Look, I just became completely emotionless at the end of it. There was nothing more. I was giving nothing to humanity. I was taking away. I was just running myself empty." And he left and got married, and he's got a beautiful wife and happily living his life now. But there's still that massive underground movement of lonely men with no leaders. It was a real. It's almost a crisis of male masculinity. There's no. We don't have groups. My father was in the Rotary and the Lions, and they had their. He was in law, and so he had his law. So and men just are sort of pretty isolated now. And so this is the new idol for a lot of men. Hey, I'm lonely, and then suddenly you've got this new idol. Yeah.
So what do you hope? What are you hoping the film is going to do?
Well, I hope it basically, first thing, I hope that it sells its socks off because it's got plenty, and the world needs to see what's going on, that this is going to be a really popular film, that a lot of people watch it, and it starts a lot of conversations. And we had several plans to take it through all the universities around the world, but that's just, a lot of things that we had planned around this whole thing have now fallen by the wayside, obviously with COVID, but now that we're going to be bringing it onto all the transactional websites like Apple, Google Play, YouTube, Amazon, then we'll be able to really get the message out there, and people can see what it really, what it's all really about.
Cool. And yourself, are you working on any new films?
I'm pretty focused on this one at the
Yep.
moment, just getting this one out with limited, with the limitations of what's going on at the moment. There's also limitations and opportunity as well, because right now there's the COVID world has meant that all the big Hollywood budgets are out the window. They're just sitting around waiting for their opportunity to bring it into the. So there's a lot of opportunity in that sense. There's a good opportunity there, but also plans have been dashed around launching and stuff like this. But that's just the nature of every business. I think you just got to adapt to every changing day and circumstance. But the main thing is it's a powerful story.
Yeah.
Really interesting watch, and that's what people are looking for. And I watch Netflix all the time and stuff. Some just like so bored. I mean, some of it's just like it feels like this canned food. It's like, God, I want something a little bit different. Give me something. I think there's a genuine desire out there for something a little bit different. It feels like I'm being spoon-fed the same thing all the time.
Yeah. Well, thank you for talking to me about the film, because like I said,
it.
I watched the end of the film and I saw this New Zealand credit in there. I was like, well, what's that all about? So led me to you.
Yeah, and here I am. Yeah, but I mean, it's all just stems from being overseas. If you're a filmmaker, get overseas, see what's happening. There's a lot of stuff happening, and you can really like broaden your horizons. Just staying in New Zealand is just, we are a small market. There's only 4-5 million of us here. Yeah. But once you get overseas, you see there's just so much more happening, and you can really, So I've been doing a lot of stuff from, just pushing out further than New Zealand. I think there's real opportunities for filmmakers in New Zealand to actually get out there and do different things.
Cool. All righty. Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, man.